Hi, it's Steph, and we're at the Home Depot, and they've just received a whole new shipment of beautiful shrubs, perennials, and annuals. So let's go ahead and take a look at the May inventory at the Home Depot. I have to start off with one of my very favorite summer annuals, the Dipladenia. Now these are absolutely rock star plants. They are annuals, they're tropical, they are so drought resistant, they have non-stop blooms from right now in early spring all the way through your first hard frost, and they don't require any deadheading. They are really just great for containers. I can sometimes go every other day watering my containers with Dipladenia planted in them. And while these are normally $6.98, they're currently running a sale at 3 for $15, which is a great price for $5 for one of these. And look at all of these beautiful tropicals that they have that you can use as a centerpiece in the middle of your containers for summer. Now they have white birds of paradise. They also have majesty palms. And the great thing about this is that when you're done using them in your containers for summer, you can then use them as houseplants. And then they also have cordyline, two types of cordyline, this spike version here and this one with a bit of a thicker blade. And these are $7.98. So you could pick up one of these at $7.98 and 3 of these quart-sized Dipladenias at $15. And for about $23, you have a really beautiful summer container that will bloom nonstop all season. And I've actually used this dark cordyline with the white Dipladenia, and it makes such a beautiful arrangement. And there are some new shrubs in stock. This is the Proven Winners Wine and Roses Weigela, and I actually have this one in my garden, and I really love the dark foliage because I think it makes a beautiful contrast to all of the green in the garden. So if you plant this in one of your mixed borders, it really stands out. And then in May, it gets these really pretty pink blooms that are bell-shaped. The pollinators love them, especially the hummingbirds, because they can get in there with their beak. Really pretty. This one is average or medium sized at 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. Here's a photo of what it looks like when it's blooming. It is gorgeous. Look at that. And it likes sun. It is hardy in USDA growing zones 4 through 8, and it gets to be 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. And it blooms in late spring. And if you do need to prune it, to size control it, etc., it does bloom on old wood. So the best time to prune it would be right after it's done blooming. And these here are a number 2 container for $29.98. And this gorgeous spring blooming plant is a peony. Well, whether you call them peony or peony, we can both agree that they are gorgeous. They get these really large, fluffy, and fragrant blooms in about mid to late spring. They come in different varieties. This one here happens to be the Carl Rosenfield, which is a fuchsia, kind of red color. Most of the herbaceous peonies are in this size range of 30 to 36 inches tall and wide and very hardy, down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The thing with the herbaceous peonies is that they sometimes will flop under the weight of those big, beautiful blooms, so they do need some staking. So as soon as you see the eyes pop through the soil, it'll be a good idea to go ahead and put up a support cage that they can grow through to keep them nice and upright as they bloom. You'll see often that these buds will get ants on them, and all that is that the ants are there feeding on the nectar, and shortly thereafter the peony will bloom. So don't worry if you see ants on your bloom buds. 2 things to share about peonies is that you want to make sure you don't plant them too deeply. The eyes or the crown of the plant should be just about at soil level. If you plant them too deep, they sometimes don't bloom that well. So if you have a peony that you've had planted for a while that's not blooming too well, maybe after they bloom this season, dig them up, bring them up a bit, and see if you get better blooming next season. And they also grow well in full sun, but can also handle part sun. Look at this gorgeous sedum with this beautiful red coloring. I love sedums. They're so drought tolerant. If you have a little rock garden, or if you just don't like to water your garden that often, these are a great plant. They thrive in full sun, and this variety is called Stone Crop Sedum Sun Sparkler. And it looks like it's pretty short, 12 to 18 inch spacing, only 6 to 8 inches in height, and it has a clumping habit. This Sun Sparkler sedum looks like it's going to have clusters of light pink or pink blooms. And in general, the bigger the sedum, the taller the bloom stalks will be and the larger the cluster of blooms. But this one has a really gorgeous color. These flowering dogwoods that are just starting to bloom. So pretty. These are the flowering dogwood Cherokee Princess. They like part sun. They have this buttery creamy white color. They basically look yellow, and they're so cute. Now these are in a small container, which would make them easy to plant, and they're affordable, $34.98. And with Mother's Day coming around, this would be a great gift to pick up and plant a beautiful tree for your mom. And every year when it blooms, they'll remember you. I actually have a Mother's Day blood-good Japanese maple, a magnolia, as well as a dogwood, and I love them. Now dogwoods, most of them are part sun trees, and they do really well planted under the canopy of deciduous larger trees, things like oaks and so forth. So they're usually considered understory trees. And these are medium size. I would say anywhere from 15 to 20 or 25 feet tall and wide, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Friends, when I was here just a couple of weeks ago, these beauties were $129, and I think they've been marked down because the price on them now is $59.98. That is a steal of a deal. These are stunning. Look at the color on these. They are the Colorado Blue Spruce globosa. They're a globe-shaped version of the Colorado Blue Spruce. And this color is amazing in the garden. In order to keep this beautiful silvery blue-gray color, they need to get full sun. They are deer resistant. I have a couple of spruces like this, Colorado Blue Spruces. The deer do not touch them. They get to be 3 to 5 feet in height and about the same, well, a little bit bigger, 5 to 6 feet in spacing. Hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, so very hardy. These are stunning. They only have 2 here left at my store, but if you can find one near you, I would certainly consider picking one up. Look at these cuties. They've just been pruned into a ball and they look like boxwood, right? But they're not. They're hollies. This is Ilex hugendorn. And these are 1 gallons for $16.98. And what's great about holly is that they make a great alternative to boxwood. So if you don't want to grow boxwood because maybe you're fearful of boxwood blight, which has been kind of an epidemic recently, this would be a great alternative. They look very similar. And these are $16.98 for a 1 gallon container. And this vibrant variegated shrub here is a euonymus. Now, I will tell you, I'm not a huge fan of euonymus. I had this planted in my garden, a similar variety with this variegation, about 10 years ago when I was first starting my landscape. And slowly over the years, all of the variegation got lost and it reverted back to just being a green shrub. And then the deer really liked it, so it was always getting chomped on. So for that reason, I ended up digging it up and replacing it with something else. But if you like euonymus, look at this. It does offer really beautiful color if it keeps the variegation. This one is called Euonymus cholipo. It likes full sun and it gets to be 12 feet in height and 6 feet in width. So it's pretty good sized and hardy down to 0 degrees, and $16.98 for this 1 gallon container. Home Depot's knocking it out of the park with some of these gems that they're bringing in terms of conifers this season. I did mention a few videos back that I always get excited when I find these rare finds at the garden center. Today's rare find is a juniper gold cone. Now look how pretty these are. They make a really columnar type evergreen, which planted in a group like this makes a real impact in the landscape. This is an evergreen shrub, which for those of us who live in cold climates, this provides interest all year round in the garden, especially in the winter when all of our perennials are dormant. Now this one here, very compact. It gets to be 3 to 5 feet tall, 12 to 24 inches wide. So 3 of these in a cluster would look stunning together. And junipers are also pretty drought tolerant once they're established. So these like sun. You can see they have all of their new golden tips coming out. That's all the new growth. And then when it's done with its new growth, it has this sort of bluish color with a little bit of a gold tint to it. Look at that. These juniper gold cone in a number 3 container are $34.98. And I have to tell you, the size on these is just perfect. If you have a smaller landscape, or even if you want to just cluster some together for a bigger impact, at 3 to 5 feet tall and 12 to 24 inches wide, these would look really great in a group. Here's another beauty that I showed during my last visit, and this is a fern spray gold Hinoki cypress. It is gorgeous. This is also one of those rare finds, and that is what it looks like. It has a beautiful golden color, a really kind of graceful arching growth habit. It likes full sun, and it can get 4 to 8 feet in width and 6 to 12 feet in height. Very hardy, down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. $29.98 for the Chemiciparus fern spray gold. Look at this beauty. This is another one of my favorites. This is the Blue Star Juniper, and I have about 4 of these in my garden for about over 10 years now, and they only get to be about 3 to 4 feet in diameter and roughly 18 inches in height. They are pretty low growing, which makes them a great option for the front of a border. They're also deer resistant and drought tolerant. And in order to get this beautiful, vibrant blue gray coloring, they need to be planted in full sun. I haven't had any issues with pests or diseases on them thus far, and they're hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And these are in a #1 container for $16.98. And what I love about blue conifers like this is that when you combine them with things like yellow, you can see that there with the gold mop cypress behind them, and then the blue and then green, they really just make such a beautiful contrast in the garden. Gold mop cypress or false threadleaf cypress. These are gorgeous. I also have a couple in my garden. In fact, one of them had gotten a little too large for its space, and I went through and I pruned it into a small topiary tree, and I gave it a new life, and it fits in its space much better now. I can actually link that video below if you have a similar situation and you'd like to see how I did that. But these are really beautiful. They have this really graceful kind of ferny texture, and they contrast so nicely with other plants in the garden. This is sort of what they look like when they get full grown. They get to be 8 to 10 feet in height and 36 to 48 inches in width, and hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. They are deer resistant in my garden. They do not touch them, and in order for these to have this beautiful golden color, they need to be in full sun. If they are in more shade, they will kind of look like this, more green, like you see on the undersides of the leaves that don't get a lot of sun. Actually a great size #1 container for $16.98. I always love the small containers, especially with conifers like this that will grow pretty quickly, because the root ball is easier to plant and they're more affordable. Another really pretty and interesting evergreen is a mugo pine. Look at the way that these grow. Isn't that so pretty? They have a nice upright growth habit, and they start to put out their candles now in spring, and this is what the candles look like on them. And the way to size control shrubs like this, pines, is that when they start putting out their spring candles, you can go ahead and do what they call tip pruning or candle pruning. Cut those off each year, and it will help control the size of your shrub, especially if you don't want it to get too large. So these here are deer resistant. They like full sun. It says that this one can get 3 to 15 feet in height, but oftentimes I will see the dwarf mugo pine also for sale here at the Home Depot. And it is hardy, very hardy, down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. These mugo pines here are in a #1 container for $16.98. And look at this beautiful shrub. This is a false holly, so it's not an actual holly. It just has holly-like foliage. And it is an osmanthus. The variety is called goshiki, and I actually have one of these in my garden. Look how beautiful this variegation is. It's like a speckled green and yellow leaf. Now they're pretty spiky, but the new growth is pretty soft. It looks kind of red when it comes out, or pink, and then it will harden as it matures, but a really beautiful contrast shrub. Now this is deer resistant. I can vouch for that because I have mine planted in a woodland bed that backs up to the woods with lots of deer, and they don't touch it. It's listed as a part sun shrub. Mine is located in a part sun location. It's deer resistant and drought tolerant. In general, when you see drought tolerant, that means after the plant has been in your garden for a couple of seasons and has gotten watered regularly. At that point, it can withstand a little bit of drought, and it gets to be 42 inches in height, and it needs 3 to 5 foot spacing, hardy down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And these here are in a #3 container for $29.98. Here's another flowering shrub. This is a spirea, and this proven winner's variety is called the Double Play Artisan Spirea. Now these have really beautiful foliage. Spireas are generally really easy shrubs, and the pollinators love their blooms that come out at some point during the summer. This one just has green foliage. I have one in my garden called the Candy Corn Spirea, and it is stunning. It goes through so many different color changes on the foliage. So this Double Play Artisan Spirea, it is a sun or part shade shrub. It gets to be 2 to 2.5 feet tall and wide, so pretty compact, and it is hardy in USDA growing zones 3 through 8. And look how pretty those blooms are in pink. So pretty. Look at that, gorgeous. These are a #2 container for $29.98. Some more beautiful perennials. Now these are the large #3 container perennials. They have some Caradonna salvia, which is a really popular variety because it has these really pretty dark stems. Look at that. It's a gorgeous salvia. This one here is, let's see how large it gets, 18 to 24 inches in height and needs 12-inch spacing, hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms early to late summer. So it seems that this one would bloom later than other varieties like the May Night. So if you really like salvias, it would be a great idea to plant a couple of different varieties. I actually have May Night in my garden, but I've been interested in trying the Caradonna. So I might have to do that soon to extend how many blooms I get out of salvia in my garden. I really love this. So $19.98 for this container. And because it is so large, you could easily divide it right out of the container and plant 2 plants instead of just 1. But of course, you'd want to make sure you keep it well watered as it starts to establish a new root system. Some hardy geraniums. Now these are the perennial variety that you would put in your garden, in your borders, as opposed to the other geraniums like the pelargoniums that are typically treated as annuals. This is the Roseanne variety, which is one that blooms for a really long time and has sporadic reblooming throughout the whole season, sometimes into early fall. So here it is. It likes part sun. It is a perennial. It's a mounded growth habit, attracts butterflies, and it gets to be 18 to 20 inches in height and needs 18 to 24-inch spacing, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And a number 3 container for $19.98. Again, you can certainly divide this right out of the container, probably into about 3 or 4 plants. Look at that, really beautiful light pink blooms. This plant here looks like a phlox, right? But it's actually Celine, which is a spring bloomer. And last time I was here, this was still all budded up, but look at it in full bloom now. Nice and upright and sturdy. That is gorgeous. Let me show you the information on it. Celine, this one's called Rolly's Favorite, $19.98 for this container. That's all the info that's on it, but it has nice, sturdy, upright stems and these really gorgeous pink blooms. Speaking of salvias, they're starting to come out with more pink varieties. Look at that. Traditionally, salvia has been known as a purple colored plant, and sometimes you even see white salvias. But in the last several years, there's been a whole lot more pink salvias, and they're really gorgeous. Look at that. So beautiful mixed with all of these plants here. There's some Celine, some Tiarellas, some creeping phlox, which is a gorgeous low-growing ground cover type phlox. Look at this. So pretty. This one has some pink and white. This one is the Drummond's pink. They even come in light lavender. I really love this plant. It's currently growing in my garden and I have it interplanted with daffodils and it makes for a really beautiful combination. Now back to this salvia here. This very similar in shape to my May Night, but let's see what variety this is, the pink variety here. This one is called Rose Marvel, and it is again $19.98 for this number 3 container. It is a perennial and it likes full sun. I also find these to be very drought tolerant once they are established, and they're hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. So 10 to 12 inches in height and 12 to 14 inch spacing. Again, remember, you can certainly divide these right out of the container. What's great about salvia too is that they have a fragrance that's off-putting to critters, so deer and rabbit, stay away from them. And some astilbe, which I absolutely love in a shady garden. Such a great way to add a pop of color in a shady corner. I actually just recently made a video about astilbe that I can also link below, but look at this. You get these beautiful ferny textured leaves and then these bloom spikes that will bloom for me in my garden usually towards the mid to end of June, but I absolutely love them. They have these plumes, these fuzzy plumes of blooms. Look at that. This one is called a peach blossom and it looks stunning. It gets to be 24 inches in height. It needs 15 to 18 inches in width, and it says water when dry. However, in my experience of growing astilbe, I do find that they do like consistent moisture. In fact, mine have only bloomed well when I make sure that they have adequate moisture and I fertilize them in early spring with a granular type all-purpose fertilizer. I like to use the Espoma Plant Tone, but look at that. Foam flower, which is also beautiful. I planted some in my garden last year and I cannot wait to see them bloom. Look at this. They get these really gorgeous bottle brush looking blooms and this really pretty foliage that looks like a heuchera or coral bell. See that? Has a little bit of a red veining in the center. So this would coordinate beautifully with something like a red coral bell. These do like a part sun location, maybe even shade. You can see that there. And this one's called Spring Symphony. Gets to be 7 to 10 inches in height, a little bit taller with the bloom spikes, and it needs 12-inch spacing. Hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and they bloom mid-spring. Some Walker's Low catmint. This is a really popular variety of catmint. It gets really beautiful, wide and large, and just sprawls on the ground. They look gorgeous planted underneath roses, and they get these really pretty light purple blooms. They bloom for a really long time. Pollinators love them, and critters like deer and rabbit stay away from them. The foliage has a minty fragrance, which is also really pleasant, and it's also known as Nepeta or Nepeta, depending where you're from. They again like full sun, deer resistant, drought tolerant, and this variety says that it gets 10 inches in height and needs 12-inch spacing. But I have seen these get as wide as about 24 inches in width, so they can certainly put on some width. And these are in the Home Depot brand containers for $9.98. Above here they have this spring blooming beauty, Bleeding Hearts. Look how gorgeous this foliage is. They have these nice sturdy stems that sometimes take on a shade of pink, and of course they're dangly blooms that look like little heart-shaped earrings. And once the bloom is a little further along, they start to open up like this, and that is how they get the name Bleeding Heart. These are stunning. Now, they are listed as a part shade plant, but I will tell you, any Bleeding Heart that I have seen in sun does amazing. And in fact, it gets much larger and has many more blooms than the ones that are planted in shade. You can see here that they are deer resistant. I can vouch for that. They do not touch them in my garden. Brighton's Shade Gardens, and they have a really pretty arching growth habit. And some foxgloves. Now, foxgloves have a little bit of a controversial reputation because they can be toxic. So you certainly don't want to eat the plant, any part of it, the seeds, the foliage, etc. So if you have children or pets, something you might want to be cautious about. They are perennial. This one here is listed as perennial as a pink panther. In general, I would say that foxgloves are actually a biennial, where the first year you usually get foliage and root growth, and then in year 2 you will get these beautiful bloom stalks. So if you planted this in your garden and it didn't return next year, I wouldn't be surprised because I don't think that they're always reliably perennial. If you found a variety, let me know down in the comments because I would love to find one because they are gorgeous. So this one here, the pink panther, gets to be 18 to 22 inches in height, and they get to be 12 to 16 inches in width, hardy down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms early to midsummer. Now I will tell you that they do self-seed prolifically, so perhaps if they drop a lot of seeds, they'll return in your garden the following year with foliage, and then maybe you'll get blooms in subsequent years. But in general, they are a really beautiful and kind of like a quintessential cottage flower. And a great price on these Vigoro Core Annuals for 3 for $10. These are the New Guinea Impatiens, and they come in such beautiful, vibrant colors. Look at this one here, such a hot pink, like a fuchsia, with a little bit of an iridescent tone to it. Reminds me of a nail polish I really liked to get by OPI called Kinky in Helsinki. Let me know in the comments if you remember that shade or if you still enjoy it. So pretty. And it also comes in a really gorgeous orchid kind of color with a little bit of purple to it. And then there is even this orange, which I've grown before and I really love it. Such a pretty like coral vibrant color, and white, which is also really classy and beautiful. Someone just told me you can't kill these. They are stunning. Now here's some information on growing the New Guinea Impatiens. They do prefer shade, even part shade. If you're giving them just a little bit of morning sun, they will do just fine. And when you see plants or annuals that have these thick stems like that, that means that they hold on to a lot of moisture, similar to things like coleus and begonias. And that also means that you don't have to water them that frequently because you don't want to risk rotting them and then these stems start to break off. So every other day or so, maybe even every 2 days, just stick your finger in the soil, and if they feel dry, then you can go ahead and water them. We were talking about Mother's Day a little while ago, and look at this. They have these cute little macrophylla type hydrangeas in these gift sets. They have a pink macrophylla, a blue macrophylla, as well as a red. Now these are also known as the big leaf or mop head type hydrangeas. The thing to know about these is that even though they're marked as blue or pink, depending on the acidity of your soil is what color they will bloom. If you have a more acidic soil, they will bloom more blue, and if you have a more alkaline soil, they will be more pink or purple. But $9.98 for these packaged hydrangeas. Lots of 8-inch drop and decorate containers. These are wonderful if you don't want to think about what you want to put in your containers. They've already done the thinking for you. You just pick one of these up and drop them into your planters. And usually they have a couple of different plants in here. This one looks like it has a calabricoa in a color purple and a white petunia. But these are $10.98 for the smaller ones. They also have some here with these New Guinea impatiens in shades of red. There are also some geraniums, and look at these cute geranium containers in a decorative watering can planter for $22.98. Geraniums have really beautiful foliage. Now these are the annual geraniums, but you can actually store these over the winter and have them for many years. There's ways to do that. Petunia and geranium hanging baskets by Vigoro for $19.98. Now look how cool this petunia is. It's like tie-dye. I've grown one of these before. Very pretty. These beautiful hanging baskets with the coconut core, and they have different plants in them, petunias, calabricoa, and these are by Proven Winners, and they're $39.98 for the 12-inch cocoa hanging basket. Now throughout the summer, your petunias might start to get a little bit scraggly, right? They'll start hanging at the edge off of the basket, and they'll start to look leggy and not bloom as well. So don't be afraid to go back and just cut them right back. Feed them with some fertilizer because they are heavy bloomers. So remember, they're going to need food to keep pumping these blooms. And then they will reflush out and be nice and bushy for you. So that's a tip. Don't be afraid to cut your petunias at the level of the basket. Anything that's hanging downward, give them a nice haircut, and then they'll flush out again. Look at these gorgeous osteospermum. I love them. Look at that. They look like a little rainbow. So pretty. Now these are by Proven Winners, and they look like daisies, right? The shape of them. Well, that's because they're a type of African daisy. And this variety is called Bright Lights Horizon Sunset Osteospermum Hybrid. And it gets to be 8 to 12 inches in height and probably similar spacing. Yeah. And it's an annual except in zones 9A through 11B. It says to fertilize it regularly for best results, and it likes full to part sun. Now, I will say that I grew osteospermum for the first time last year. I think they like cooler temperatures. Now, I didn't try the Proven Winners one yet, but the one that I tried, I picked up at a local nursery, and it bloomed really well at the end of May through about June, end of June, July, when it was still kind of cool. But as soon as the height of the summer came and it got really hot, they kind of took a break on me and started to bloom again at the end of the summer, beginning of fall. So I think they take a little break when it gets super hot out. But what gorgeous plants. And these are a pretty good sized container for $9.98. Now they are an annual, but this will fill a pot. There's also a golden color osteospermum. This one's called Bright Lights Yellow. And it likes full to part sun. It gets to be 8 to 12 inches in height. This is also a annual, and it is $9.98. You can see right here. The variety of osteospermum. This one is called Bright Lights Purple, and very pretty color as well. All of the Proven Winners annuals are in. Look at these beautiful petunias. These are the Supetunia Royal Velvet. Very pretty. And these are all $5.98 here at my store at the Home Depot. I know that the price varies on some of these quart size annuals, but this is how much they happen to be here at my store. Here's a little plant that has big flower power. This is Biden's, and the variety is called Goldilocks Rocks. It's long blooming, heat tolerant, no deadheading, and drought tolerant. $5.98 for this quart size container, and it gets to be 8 to 12 inches in spacing and 8 to 14 inches in height. So really great, nice low growing, sprawling type annual. And we always love those drought tolerant ones because if we forget to water and they thrive in heat, they just keep going and going with the blooms. Also a white variety of this Biden's called Campfire Marshmallow. So that would be another great option if you didn't care for yellow and maybe wanted something in the white shade. Let me share with you a lobelia that's an absolute rock star. Now these are not in full bloom yet, but this is the Laguna Sky Blue lobelia by Proven Winners. This is $5.98 again for the quart size. They're all that same price, 4.5 inch pots. This one was the best lobelia that I have tried in my garden. I had it planted in a container that was in part shade, and this bloomed and got large. By the end of the summer, heading into the fall, I actually had them blooming because I still had pumpkins that I put along the bottom to decorate for fall, and they were still pumping out blooms. So it has these really light blue blooms that coordinate so nicely with pink flowers, white flowers, even orange flowers. I had them with orange sun patience, and they coordinated so beautifully together. So if you're looking for a really great lobelia, I highly recommend the Laguna Sky Blue. And in case you're looking for a spiller outside of your containers, here is some Vinca vine, a 4-inch container for $3.98, and these are variegated. Oftentimes you also find things like ivy, but I don't see ivy yet, just the Vinca. Look at this, beautiful hanging baskets of the New Guinea impatiens for $19.98. What a great price. And look at the size of these blooms. So gorgeous. And tons of buds. Look at that. Great price on these. Look at these gorgeous hanging baskets. These are the proven winners, Fairy Tale Trailing Hydrangea for $49.98. These blooms are stunning. Look at this, they have like a scalloped edge. They're so dainty and just very ethereal looking. Look at that. So the Fairy Tale or Fairy Trail Bride Cascade Hydrangea. Look at that. Isn't that stunning? It needs 4 to 6 hours of sun per day. It is hardy in USDA growing zones 6 through 9, and it gets to be 4 feet tall and wide. And it has abundant blooms, spring blooming. That is so beautiful. Another really pretty spiller for your containers. This is a sweet potato vine, and the variety is called the Sweet Caroline Bewitched Green with Envy. And it gets to be, let's see, it has a 10 to 16 inch height, but it is trailing, so it'll start to fall down your container. It looks particularly beautiful on a dark colored container, like something like brown or black for a planter, and combined with different color foliage plants. So coleus even, or petunias, any annuals really, they're just stunning. Heat tolerant, no deadheading needed, and it is a foliage interest plant. I really like the shape of these leaves. Look at this beauty. This is a Runcus, also known as goat's beard, and it is closely related to a stilbe, as you can tell by the type of ferny foliage as well as the plume type blooms. Now this is I would say a more compact Aruncus or goat's beard, but it still gets to be about 40 inches in diameter and about 30 to 32 inches in height. This is what I like to call a specimen perennial, one that gets to a good enough size, almost like a shrub-like size that you can plant by itself and surround it with a drift of other type of coordinating perennials. I think this would look really beautiful planted with things like coral bells or even different shades of hosta foliage to give a really nice contrast. Now they bloom let's take a look. So bloom time early summer through midsummer. So that's when they bloom. They get to be 40 to 48 inches in size and 30 to 32 inches in height, and hardy in zones 3 through 7. And on the back of the proven winners tags, it will also tell you what plants you can pair them with. So you can see here just what I suggested, actually, coincidentally: hosta, coral bells, spiderwort, tiarella or foamflower, brunnera, and ferns. And these here are in a 2.5 quart container for $12.98. Look how pretty they are. The proven winners, Amazing Daisies, Daisy May. Now these are a shorter stature daisy, getting to be 12 to 24 inches in height, whereas some of the old-fashioned Shasta daisies can get anywhere from 24 to maybe 48 inches in height. They can get pretty tall. And this one here says that it is a medium height, 12 to 24. It needs about a 14-inch spacing and hardy in zones 5 through 9, actually, down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms in early summer through late summer, and it likes a full sun in order to get the most blooms. That is really pretty. And these are also $12.98 for this 2.5 quart size container. But I actually found that they also had these small quart containers for $7.98, which makes them a great price point, and these will grow. And daisies do self-seed pretty readily. So even if you start with something small like this, over the next 2 to 3 years, you'll have plenty to divide and move around in your garden. Or Nepeta or cat mint. This one is called Cat's Meow by Proven Winners, and this is the Proven Winners version of the Walker's Low. They're very similar in size. So this one here gets to be 17 to 20 inches in height, and it gets 24 inches in width. See, up to 36 inches. So they can sprawl pretty far and look really beautiful on the ground and planted with other perennials. So it is hardy in zones 3 through 8, and it blooms early summer into fall. So with regular deadheading, you can get subsequent blooms out of these. So after its very first flush, go through, clean them up, cut them back, just follow the stem down, give it a cut, and it will reflush with more blooms throughout the whole season. Beautiful, fragrant foliage, deer and rabbit resistant, just a really great perennial. Some phlox. This one is called the Opening Act Romance by Proven Winners. It is perennial, it likes full sun, and this variety gets to be 20 to 22 inches in height, and it needs 32-inch spacing. When it comes to phlox, you should definitely pay attention to the spacing requirements, because phlox is prone to something called powdery mildew. So if you give it proper spacing, it'll improve the airflow around the plant, and it will be less likely to suffer with powdery mildew, which is just, it kind of looks like there's a powdery substance on your foliage. It will make the plant look pretty unsightly, and it'll make the plant a little bit unhealthy. So something to be aware of, but otherwise it's a really beautiful garden perennial, and it does really well in the summer. The Proven Winners phlox has been bred to be more disease resistant and less likely to get the powdery mildew. But look at this beautiful light pink bloom. It's very similar to the traditional Gina type of garden phlox. And look at this gorgeous bright pop of yellow. This is a sedum called Angelina Stonecrop, and I have this in my garden, and it is a low growing ground cover type sedum. And it stays mostly evergreen for me in my zone 6B, 7A garden. It goes a bit of a bronze color, kind of what you see there on the label in the winter months, and then in the summer it gets this gorgeous vibrant yellow, which is so stunning and really makes a spot in the garden light up. Super easy to spread around. You see these pieces here that break off of your plant if you're transplanting it or moving it around in the garden? All you have to do is shove this into soil, and it will start to root and create a new plant. It's just that easy to start new sedum plants. And I noticed that someone changed their mind on this mint here. Just a little tip, if you are going to grow mint, certainly grow it in a container, because this can take off and spread and get pretty aggressive pretty fast. Look at this gorgeous coral bell. That is stunning. So pretty. So I just found what I'm bringing home today. I'm going to pick up a couple of these. This is what the new growth looks like, with a bit of red veining, and then it has this really pretty bright yellow color. And these are great shade plants. So this is a wonderful way to bring a lot of color into a shady spot in the garden. So many people think that, you know, you can't have blooming plants in a shady garden, but you can. There are things like anemones and even astilbe that will bloom in the shade, and coral bells, which will send up these bloom stalks, as well as hosta, which also bloom. But look how much color you can bring into the garden by just the use of foliage, whether it be through heucheras or even hosta. Really pretty. This beauty is called the Coral Bells Heuchera Delta Dawn, and it has a mounded growth habit. It gets to be 10 to 18 inches in height, 12 to 18 inch spacing, and hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms late spring through summer, when it will send up those spikes of blooms. More really pretty pink salvias in a smaller container by Vigoro, and this one is called Pink Nebula, and it gets to be 10 to 36 inches in height and needs 10 to 24 inch spacing. Hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit and blooms early summer through fall. Look at these fun daisy annuals that I just found here at the Home Depot. This is the first time I've seen these varieties. This is a type of, it looks like a Gerbera daisy in shades of pink and more fuchsia, and even this coral salmon color. And these are called the Easy Daisy, the daisy that never stops. Very cool. This looks like it might be a Home Depot exclusive. And these are $10.98. They also have them in yellow and in a bright orange. Another pretty coral bell. This one is called Paris, and it has this really pretty green kind of spearmint color foliage. Very similar to the spearmint by Proven Winners. They have a spearmint heuchera that looks like this, and look, it has all of its blooms. If you didn't like these blooms, you can certainly cut them off, but I think they look really pretty, and the pollinators like them. And this one here is, let's see how much, $10.98 for the Paris Coral Bell Heuchera. More garden phlox. This one is by Vigoro, and it is called Baby Doll Pink. And phlox, all of them like full sun, with the exception of the woodland phlox. And there is some in stock, and I'll show it to you. But they come in different heights. So you have the creeping phlox, which is a ground cover that will bloom first in spring. Then there are different heights on the garden phloxes. There are shorter, medium, and talls. Here's a type of phlox that can grow in more shade. So this is woodland phlox. Now, what's great about this is that not only can it grow more shade, but it's fragrant. It has such a lovely fragrance. Really beautiful light purple coloring. And the name on this one is the Woodland Phlox Blue Moon. It is a perennial, fragrant, attracts butterflies, and has an upright growth habit. And 1.5 gallons for $14.98. Blooms late spring through summer and gets to be 10 to 12 inches in height and 12 to 15 inch spacing. Hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And it is really beautiful. Here's another one of my favorite garden perennials. It is the penstemon. Look at this gorgeous dark foliage, and then it will get these very dainty bell-shaped blooms in shades of light pink, white, purple, just really beautiful. The pollinators love them. They're always in there getting their snacks. You can see this one is all budded up and getting ready to bloom. They are a middle of the border type plant based on their height. You can see that they're pretty tall. I would say probably average 30 inches in height. Let's take a look at the variety. So this is the beard tongue or penstemon Dakota Burgundy, and it is a full sun perennial. It gets to be 36 inches in height, needs 12 to 18 inch spacing, and hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms early to late summer, but these are a real beauty. And this dark foliage contrasts so nicely with all of the other green in the garden. We're getting ready to fill up this area here with some beautiful ornamental grasses. Now these are a great way to add texture and movement to the garden. This happens to be one of my favorite varieties. It is the reed grass Carl Forester, or Calamagratis Carl Forester. This is a very compact variety of ornamental grass. It gets to be anywhere from 4 to 6 feet in height, but only 2 to 3 feet in width. It is deer resistant, drought tolerant, and has a nice compact upright habit. Some ornamental grasses, when they get really large, they tend to get a little bit floppy. Not this one. It likes full sun, and it is hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And as we get into the end of summer, it will send up these plumes that look like wheat, which really transitions beautifully into fall. And these are $16.98. Check out this variety of phlox. It is listed as a woodland phlox, but also that it can take full sun. So who knows? Look at that. Woodland phlox may breeze. Says it likes full sun. It is perennial, $9.98 in this Home Depot brand container, and it gets to be 15 to 18 inches in height and 15 inch spacing. Hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit and blooms late spring through summer, but it does have a really pretty and dainty appearance. And this is a rockstar perennial. This is pincushion flower, also known as scabiosa, and the variety is butterfly blue. Now, the thing about this one is that it is a short-lived perennial. Where most perennials will come back to your garden year after year, this one might only return for 2 or 3 seasons and then die back. And I'm actually going to pick up one today as a replacement to one that I did have that died back because I love it that much. It has serious flower power. See how many buds are on here? This blooms nonstop from right now in spring all the way through your first hard frost in fall. The pollinators love it and are all over it all the time, and it is just really pretty and dainty. So here's the information on this one. So pincushion flower, scabiosa butterfly blue, gets to be 12 to 18 inches in height, needs 12 to 15 inch spacing, and it is hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and starts blooming late spring all the way through fall. Is another really beautiful perennial, and this is yarrow, also known as achillea. Now this one gets these really beautiful clusters of blooms, but look at the foliage. It has this silvery kind of blue ferny foliage, which is really beautiful. This coordinates so nicely with other perennials in the garden. This looks lovely paired with things like phlox and coneflowers, even salvia, and even with this butterfly blue scabiosa. Let me show you. Look at that. They're opposite on the color wheel, the purple and the yellow, so they look so pretty together. Now this variety of yarrow is called Little Moonshine, and it gets to be 9 to 12 inches in height and 10 to 12 inch spacing. I would say it's probably closer to a 12 inch height. They can get pretty tall, and it says water when dry, so they're also very drought tolerant. In fact, I have lost several of these because I had them in a bed that retained a little too much moisture. So live and learn. Now I know that they like a very well draining soil in full sun, and they are hardy, very hardy, down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and they bloom early summer through mid-fall. So with deadheading, which means that you would take the spent blooms, follow the stem down and cut it, will keep your plant producing more blooms instead of it going back to dormant. So that's how you keep your perennials blooming longer. The first flush is always the most prolific, and subsequent blooms will be a little bit less floriferous, but if you keep deadheading it, you will get more blooms. Look at this beauty that we looked at the last time we were here. This is a Nepeta, a new variety here at the Home Depot, and their house brand container called Chartreuse on the Loose. Has this vibrant yellow golden foliage and the traditional Nepeta blooms in shades of purple, and it's a medium-sized height at 16 to 18 inches in height and in width, water when dry and hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. They bloom early summer through fall and like full sun. And look at this gorgeous ground cover that is currently in bloom. This is a type of ajuga, also known as bugleweed, and the variety is Bronze Beauty. It is a part sun ground cover. It is deer resistant and drought tolerant, and it blooms early to late spring. Now it is 6 inches in height, and it does tell you to give it 12-inch spacing, but because it sends out these runners, it will spread and get quite wide over time. So this is a really good one that over time you'll need to mulch less, because this will suppress weeds and will keep your soil cool because it'll act as a living mulch. And you get these really pretty blooms in spring. These containers are $9.98. Another really pretty ground cover is this dead nettle, also known as lamium, and this one is called Orchid Frost. And it has these really pretty light colored blooms you can see here. This one's Purple Dragon, which I have in my garden. You can see how large the foliage on the Purple Dragon is. I absolutely love this. It has a gorgeous silvery color. Just really pretty. So the Purple Dragon Spotted Dead Nettle is a part sun perennial. It is deer resistant, and it makes a decorative ground cover. It does sporadically rebloom throughout the whole season, and it blooms late spring through summer, 4 to 8 inches in height and 10 to 14 inches in space. But again, any ground cover will spread horizontally, so it's always going to be a little bit larger than what you see there. Hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. And then this variety here that we looked at, the Orchid, also deer resistant, ground cover, part shade, early to late summer blooming, 8 to 12 inches in height, and 6 to 10 inch spacing, hardy to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. Last time we were here, this speedwell was not in bloom, and it is now. And look at these beautiful, dainty little flowers. It's called the Waterberry Blue. It's deer resistant, has attractive foliage. It is low growing, so this would be a great front of the border plant, and it blooms early through midsummer. 4 to 6 inches in height, 12 to 15 inch spacing, hardy to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it likes full sun. Look at these fun daisies. They're very frilly. See that? They have like a frilly center with these double layers of petals. Let's see what variety they are. So these are in the Vigoro container, and they're a type of Shasta daisy called Double Angel Daisy. They like full sun, and they get to be 36 inches in height and 24 inches in width, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And this unique bloom here is a Centaurea montana, also known as Mountain Bluette. And this variety is called Amethyst Dream. And they have a really unique bloom in the sense that they look like a spider to me, and the bottom of it almost looks like a pineapple. So I always find these really interesting. Now I have bought a variety that was purple and white. I believe it was called Amethyst something as well, but it did not return for me this year. So I think that that variety can sometimes be a little bit finicky, but this one has a really beautiful and deep purple color. Look how nice it looks with that salvia right behind it, with the same color, but contrasting textures, kind of like a monochromatic look. I love that. Here's the information on this Mountain Bluette Amethyst Dream. It is a full sun perennial. It is compact, and it gets to be 20 inches in height and needs 28-inch spacing, hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms in early summer. Just a little while ago, we looked at this Chantilly Lace Aruncus, or goat's beard, and I mentioned that it would coordinate really nicely with plants like heuchera or coral bells. And I just happened to find a tray of really beautiful coral bells. These are the quart-size Proven Winners plants for $7.98, and look how well these look together. There are two varieties here on this tray. There is the Peachberry Ice, and there's also the, I believe this is the Primo Black Pearl, which I have in my garden, and it's gorgeous. Look at that. So pretty. But look at this grouped together. The Primo Black Pearl, the Peachberry Ice, and this Aruncus. That is stunning. Here's the information on the Primo Peachberry Ice Heuchera by Proven Winners. It does say sun or shade. I would probably go part sun, part shade on these just to prevent any scorching on the foliage. And it gets to be 8 to 10 inches in height, and it needs 30-inch spacing, so it gets quite a bit wider than it does tall. And it's hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It blooms midsummer and it likes sun to shade. Very beautiful perennial. And it will tell you again what you can coordinate them with: Lugularia, speedwell, hostas, ferns, hardy geraniums, foam flower, etc. Let's take a look at the Primo Black Pearl Heuchera. This one also says sun or shade. And I do have mine planted in a part sun location, and it seems to do pretty well. And it gets to be 8 to 10 inches in height. And it needs 26-inch spacing, hardy in zones 4 through 9. And it blooms midsummer, where it'll send up those spikes of dainty baby's breath type looking blooms. But very pretty foliage accent plants. And friends, this is what I use to keep the deer and rabbits away from my plants. They're starting to come into bloom now, which is making them very enticing to the deer and the rabbits. And I usually buy this larger one here that's pre-mixed. You just shake it well, spray all of your plants, and it usually lasts about 7 to 10 days. If you get heavy rain, you certainly want to reapply to make sure that your plants stay protected. But the smaller one here is 1427 and the larger is 2347. Cuties look like the New Guinea impatiens, but they're actually called sun patience, and these are amazing for both sun or shade. I've planted these in full sun in my front porch, which is afternoon sun and super hot, and they thrive. And they're really drought resistant. Again, they have those thick stems that hold on to water, and they are just amazing. Flower and flower nonstop from now in spring all the way through your first hard frost in fall. Lots of options when it comes to these drop and decorate containers. In fact, these seem to be filled with Proven Winners plants. There is a mix of lobelia, petunias, calibrachoa, as well as verbena. Look at that. I grew this variety of petunia last year. It is gorgeous. It's called Honey. So pretty. And these make a great option. Again, if you don't want to combine your own plants, $24.98. You just pick up one of these, drop it into your planter, and you are good to go for the season. This one here is really beautiful. You get some lobelia in there mixed with some petunias and some coleus. Look how pretty these are. Lots of color with foliage. Now, some of the new varieties of coleus can withstand a bit more sun than some of the older fashioned varieties, and these can get quite large over the course of a growing season. Now, if you want to keep your coleus blooming well, you want to make sure that you pinch off any bloom stalks that it sends up. As soon as it starts blooming, if you pinch those off, it'll keep the plant producing more foliage and it'll stay more bushy instead of the plant starting to get weaker and think that the season is over, right? But look how pretty these are. So this variety is called, it just says Flamethrower Coleus, and there's this one here that has sort of a serrated foliage, and then there's this one here that has really large, kind of a burnt orange color leaf, and there's even one here that looks like it's a bit of a yellow with some dark burgundy edges. They have flats of the wave petunias, a 6-pack for $10.98. They have them in shades of pink and a cool purple in the back there, as well as white. Well, this brings us to the end of the May inventory here at the Home Depot. As you can tell, the garden center is really filling up at this point. So I hope that you enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. I am going to check out and pick up 3 of these Delta Dawn Heucheras from my garden. So thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one.